Hey guys, welcome to Build IT with Ansible course. In this course, we are going to learn Ansible by building the complete IT environments. This is how our setup is going to look like. We will have an Ansible control node on a Linux machine. Then on a Windows 2019 plus machine, we are going to have a Active Directory domain controller. Then we will have one more Linux machine acting as a web server, and this machine will authenticate from the Active Directory. And we will also have a Windows machine which will act as a file server. And of course, this will also be acting as a domain joined file server, so it will authenticate from the Active Directory. So we already discussed for this lab, we are going to need a bunch of virtual machines. Apart from this, if you have a prior knowledge of Ansible, PowerShell and Windows administration, it will be helpful, but it's not required. In this course, we are going to teach Ansible, so if you know basics, it's good. Otherwise, we'll work through them. As far as tools and resources are concerned, we are going to use VS Code Editor with Ansible plugin for easy management. And we are also going to use a Git repository for version controlling our inventory and playbooks. What is Ansible? So Ansible is an open source tool or software which excels in the area of orchestration, configuration management, and backend task automation. So backend task like deploying a web server or deploying a Windows server or doing configuration like configuring Nginx, configuring file servers, configuring DNS, DHCP, etc. can be accomplished with Ansible easily. So why use Ansible? There are few benefits of using Ansible over other configuration management and automation tools. First of all, it's declarative. So Ansible syntax is very simple when we write Ansible configuration. They are declarative, so we don't need to write complex scripts. Secondly, it's idempotent, which means it is safe to run and rerun the same playbook without changing the end state. Now, this is also possible with automation and scripting, but in that case, script writer will have to take care of each and every scenario and handle it to make the script idempotent. Then it is reusable, so a lot of configuration once written can be reused by bundling that into roles and collections. Uh, it is also agentless, which means we don't need to install any additional client. For the Linux, it will use the native SSH, and for Windows, it will use WinRM, which is Windows Remote Management. Uh, Ansible is also testable. So because it is, all the configuration is text based, it can be easily version controlled as well as integrated with CI/CD pipelines. And last but not the least, it is a highly supported platform with strong community as well as enterprise support. Now let's discuss Ansible architecture briefly. So we are going to spend only a couple of minutes here. So the Ansible's core architecture requires only two types of nodes, the control node and the manage node. So control node is where the Ansible is installed and everything happens here. So this is the brain of Ansible. Then we have the manage nodes. We already discussed that for Linux it will use SSH, and for Windows it will use Windows Remote Management, also known as WinRM. Let's discuss this architecture in a little bit more detail. So that's how the Ansible architecture looks like on a high level. So we have a Ansible control node and we have a bunch of managed nodes. Now the Ansible administrator, which could be you, controls the managed nodes and their configuration through the playbook. So you will write playbooks, and these playbooks have a bunch of tasks that you want to perform on the managed nodes, and then you will execute the commands to send these playbook tasks to the managed nodes. Now, which nodes are managed? That is defined by the inventory. So another task of Ansible admin is to define the inventory, which is nothing but bunch of hosts bundled together by common properties like are they Windows, are they Linux, are they web servers, are they file servers. So apart from this, there are a few more things which we should discuss. So because Ansible is reusable, you can bundle your playbooks and other configuration into roles and collections, as well as and because these bundled roles are publicly published by people on Ansible Galaxy, they can also be downloaded, but you have to be careful because publicly available code can be malicious as well. Apart from this, one of the important concept is ansible.cfg, which is the configuration file in which we can define the project level uh, configuration parameters. So I can define the inventory file here and the username. And what this means is that when we are going to execute Ansible commands, we don't need to specify these parameters. Ansible will pick these parameters from here. So just as a summary, Ansible has control nodes, manage nodes, and then it has inventory, which is a collection of files in which managed nodes are grouped together. Then it has playbooks where actually tasks are defined. Tasks can be bundled into roles. And then it can also have plugins which are extensions to the Ansible. Like if somebody is writing a new connection method, it becomes a plugin. So that's a short introduction to Ansible. We will delve into the details of these concepts as we move along in the course. So welcome to part one. In this part, we are going to learn almost all major features of Ansible by building a Windows Active Directory domain controller. So let's get started. Install Ansible on control node. So in order to install Ansible on control node, we need to visit docs.ansible.com and then click on the install the Ansible package. Now here you will find a bunch of different methods for installing Ansible. But to keep the thing simple, we are going to install Ansible for our operating system, which is Ubuntu. And we will follow the official instructions. Now, as here you can see the instructions are quite small that we need to install software properties common, which will make add apt repository command available to us. Now using the add apt repository command, we are going to add the Ansible PPA repository. And once this is done, we will be ready to install Ansible. So let's first install software properties common. Now this is going to ask for the sudo password and I will provide my sudo password. As you can see, installation is complete. Now we can run the next command, which is add apt repository. Now this command is going to add the Ansible PPA repository to the control node. Now we are ready to install Ansible. So with this, our Ansible installation is complete. Now let's check if we really have Ansible. So yes, Ansible command is available. Let's check its version. So as you can see, we have Ansible core 2.8.6 installed. With this, we have completed the installation of Ansible on our control node. So now let's head back to the next task, which is to create the first INI inventory file. And for that, we are going to do some more basic prep work. I'm going to create a folder to manage our Ansible project. So we will call it Ansible Automation. Now I will switch to this directory. Now I will initiate a Git repository here. This is an optional step, but it will be good if you have Git installed, because then it is easier to manage the configuration and revert back to the old config if required. Now here it is giving me a warning that I should configure the default branch name instead of main, instead of master, it should be main or trunk, but I just don't care. So I will ignore the warning and proceed with the proceed with creation of first inventory file. So for that, we are going to head back to our Ansible. For this, we are going to create inventory files. We are going to use VS Code. Now here, we will create 3 folders. Helper scripts. In this folder, we are going to store the helper scripts which are not directly needed by Ansible, but these scripts are going to make our life easy. Then we will create inventory folder. In this folder, we are going to keep our inventory files. And after this, we are going to also create playbook folder. And this is where we are going to do majority of our work. We are going to create the playbooks and execute them on the inventory files. So with this setup, now let's create our first inventory file, and I'm going to call it lab.ini. And in this file, we are going to create our first group. Now this group is going to be a Linux group, and we want to have a web server here. So this is only a label, the name by which we want to refer our host. But the real parameter is this Ansible host. And here we need to specify the IP address of our Linux machine, which is 192.168.10.33. So this is our basic inventory file. Let's save it and start a terminal. Now in theory, we are ready to run Ansible on our managed node. So for that, let's try Ansible. And because we want to target the group Linux, let's use Linux. And now we want to run a basic test, which could be ping. So we are going to use the module using option -m ping module. And now I'm going, as a last parameter, I'm going to specify the inventory file, which is lab.ini. So let's see what happens when we do this. So as you can see, a Linux node is reachable, but permission is denied. And why is that? Because we need to configure some more parameters or at least specify them on the command line. So what are, okay, I'm going to switch to this place where it is easier to type commands and we get more screen to see. Ansible, Linux, we are targeting Linux. We want to run a module called ping and we want to execute it on the inventory file lab.ini. So once again it fails, but now we can make it work by saying ask ssh pass. Oh, no. Parameter we want to use it is ask become pass, and we also want to no, we want to pass the parameters Ansible user, which is going to be Ansible admin. Then another parameter we need is Ansible SSH pass. And this is going to be the password I'm going to use. And with this, let's try the connection. So as you can see, the connection is successful. But typing these commands is quite cumbersome. So let's go back to our inventory file and put these parameters here. So now let's go back and try the same command without these -e parameters. So as you can see, our command is successful now. And why it is successful? Because it is taking the user and the password from the INI file. Now, one more thing we can do is we can shift some of the configuration to ansible.cfg file, which is a project level file applicable to the whole Ansible automation folder. So let's create a file here and call it ansible.cfg. And in this file, we need to define a defaults section. And in this section, we are going to so as you can see, now we are able to connect to our Linux node successfully, and our command line is also quite short because we have moved the common parameters like Ansible user, SSH password into the INI file, and we have moved the parameters like location of the INI file into the ansible.config file. So that makes our command line simplified from this long to this. So let's go ahead and create our first managed node of Windows. So for that, we will head over to our Linux control node and add a new group. And we are going to call this group Windows. And here we are going to add a file server, which will have IP address of 192.168.10.32. So Ansible host equals 192.168.10.32. Oh. So with this, let's go and try to test it. So for this, we are going to do Ansible Windows -m. So for Windows, we need WinPing module, and we are going to test with that. Let's see. So this is going to fail, and we will go through the steps one by one to make it work. So as you can see, connection to file server is failing with a message that it cannot connect to the host via SSH. Now this is expected because we are on Windows, and Windows is not SSH host natively. Rather, Windows uses WinRM. So let's go ahead and set the connection method. So for that, we need to use Ansible connection keyword, and let's say that we are going to use WinRM. Now we come back and try again. So as you can see, the error message now have changed because now it's trying with WinRM, but it requires a username. And of course, when we need a username, we also need a password. So let's put both. Ansible user is going to be Ansible admin. Why? Because we have created a local user called Ansible admin, and this user is a member of administrators group. So, and we also need a parameter Ansible password. So here are minor differences. For Linux, we need Ansible SSH pass, but for Windows, we need Ansible password. Let's try again. So here, now we have all the parameters, but the connection is still failing because Windows Management Service is not reachable. And this is again expected because we have not configured Windows RM or Windows Remote Management Service. Now to configure WinRM, we need to do a bunch of steps. First of that step is that we need to enable PS remoting, and then we need to set a few more parameters. To shorten the timeline, I have created a script which I am going to share. Now, this script can be used to configure WinRM, and it can be used to configure as well as disable WinRM. So we are going to enable WinRM, and here this script is going to enable the PS remoting. Then it will set star as trusted host. After this it is going to allow unencrypted and basic authentication, and then it will proceed with creating the HTTPS listener. It will also create a password, a certificate if none is available. And finally, it will allow the firewall connection to come in and manage WinRM. So all these steps are going to take time, but because this is not our central focus, we are just going to use this handy script and enable WinRM. So as you can see, WinRM is enabled and connections are allowed through the firewall. Now we can test again. So now as you can see, error message has changed. Now it says SSL certificate verify failed. So we have a parameter using which we can tell Ansible to ignore the certificate. So the parameter is Ansible win RM certificate WinRM server third validation, and here we want to ignore the cert. So finally our Windows node is configured successfully. Now let's do one thing and configure our domain controller node as well using the same script. So I will ensure that WinRM is enabled and configured. It is there. And we also have the same user available, and it is also a member of admin group. So with this, let's add a domain controller because it is going to need the same parameters. Only difference is going to be label and the IP address, which is 31. So let's now test it. So as you can see, both the hosts are now successfully configured for WinRM, and we can use Ansible control node to manage our Windows machines as well. So far we have successfully configured our control node to reach to a Linux managed node as well as Windows managed node. Now let's do something more, which is let's use variables. So as you can see here, we are repeating a bunch of stuff again and again. Now what we can do is we can take it and centralize it by using a special parameter called vars. So here we are creating a list of variables for the Windows group, and these variables can be used repeatedly. So we have WinRM, we have Ansible user, we have password, and we have WinRM certificate validation option. Now with this, we can delete these parameters, and now our Windows group is quite simplified because the repeated parameters are now clubbed together in the variables. Let's test again. And as you can see, it's going to work successfully without any problems. Okay, so for the Linux group, we don't need to do it now, but it will be useful nonetheless if we use more managed nodes and try to manage them through Linux. So let's do this as a best practice. So notice the difference when we create variables. So when we are writing a group, we write all the parameters on single line. But when we are creating the variables, we have to add each variable on a new line. So let's test our Linux node as well. And for Linux, we are going to use ping. And as you can see, we are getting a response successfully, even when we have moved our configuration into variables. So now we have a bunch of modified files. And I think this is a good checkpoint where we should commit our configuration and inventory into the Git. So for that, we are going to do a Git inventory. And I'm going to add the inventory file. Oh, sorry. I'm going to do a Git add. And after this, I'm going to Git commit. With a meaningful message, create first inventory file. Okay. Now, after this, I'm going to have one more Git commit. And for this, I'm going to git ansible.cfg. And here I'm creating so with this, hopefully we will have nothing to commit now. Oh, we have a vault file which we have not used so far. So I'm going to leave it alone as is and finish our Windows manage node configuration. So let's now switch to the YAML inventory format. So Ansible supports INI as well as YAML inventory syntax. Now, what is the difference? So INI is a legacy but still fully supported format, and it is a flat structure where you cannot define complex structures like if I want to define a hierarchy of host or variables, that is not possible. But uh, in the YAML file, as you can see, it is a hierarchical syntax. So we have two types of host, Linux and Windows, and under which we have hosts, and then we can list down our hosts. So in Linux, we have just one host, we call it web server. In Windows, we have two hosts, we call them domain controller and file server. And then we can also define the variables. Uh, it looks similar to lab.ini for now, but this is a very powerful syntax and it can go into uh, various levels. It can create complex hierarchies. So, with this file created with similar configuration but in different syntax, let's change our ansible.cfg default to the lab.yaml and then test again. So we are going to test. Let's test Windows first with our WinPing plugin and see it works. We can also try by providing the inventory file explicitly. So lab.yaml. Okay, so why you should use inventory in the YAML syntaxes? Again, because this is more flexible and powerful syntax and it can support complex structures. We will see this as we move through the course. Okay, so now let's write our first playbook. In order to write the first playbook, we need to understand the syntax of uh, Ansible playbook, and I guess this is the most important part here. So follow it slowly, and I hope you will be able to do it in the first try. So let's head back. This is how a playbook looks like, and here we are building a playbook with the name. So be very sure of the syntax here. That syntax starts with a dash, then there is a space, and then we put a name colon and write a descriptive name of our runbook. So this runbook is going to gather and display facts. Now, what is a fact? Fact is a parameter of a system. So, a fact could be a host name, operating system version, IP address, CPU, RAM, etc. So, those facts are collected by Ansible using the built-in setup module. And we will discuss this as we move. So the next parameter is hosts. We want this runbook to target only the Linux group defined in our YAML file, so only this group. And then next parameter is gather facts, which we are setting to false. So we are setting this to false to make Ansible playbook faster, because if we set it to true, then Ansible will try to collect 100 plus various facts like CPU, RAM, disk, OS, hostname from each and every system. So instead of this, what we are doing is we are running our built-in setup module, which again gathers facts, but here we are putting a filter and we are asking only for one fact, which is Ansible distribution. And then, okay, so after the facts, we have a list of tasks. So notice name, host, gather facts, and tasks. They all are on the same indentation level, and only the name starts with the hyphen. So now under the tasks, we again have a indentation and a hyphen to start our tasks. So each task starts with a hyphen. It has a name. So we have two tasks here. In the first task, we are gathering the host OS. And in the second task, we are showing the OS distribution. So in the first task, we have given a name to our task, which is gather OS, gather host OS. And immediately after it, on the same level, we need to specify the module. So modules are these built-in or readily available functionality, which does just one thing. So here, built-in module setup is being called, which is nothing but the gather facts. But here, we are not asking it to collect all the facts. We are asking it to collect just one fact. Hence, we have applied a filter. So once we do this, Ansible will run the first task and collect the distribution. And then in the next task, we will use another module, which is debug. And debug is used for the print. So once we have the debug module, we can define a message dictionary. And in this dict, we have only one key value, which is OS family. And at this point, we have uh, at this point we are going to show it. So the OS distribution is now inside the curly braces, double curly braces, we will specify the parameter we collected in the previous task. So now let's go ahead and run our runbook. So to run the Ansible runbook, we need Ansible playbook command. And in this, we are going to specify our playbook. Now, we might have to specify a whole lot of other parameters, but they are not required now because we have specified them in our ansible.cfg. So only parameter we now need to specify is the playbook itself, which is 1.0 show facts. Now Ansible is running. It is showing that, okay, it is running a playbook gather and display facts. Then it is running the tasks. First task is to gather the host OS, and the next task is to show the distribution collected in previous tasks. So here we can see the OS distribution is Ubuntu message gets displayed. So now as you can see, this annoying message keeps on coming, which we can disable by defining a variable in our ansibles.cfg. And this variable is going to be interpreter Python. And we need to set it to auto silent. Now with this, hopefully this error message should go away. Let's run our runbook again. Voila. Our concepts we have learned so far to actually achieve the target we set ourselves at the beginning of this part, which is to create an Active Directory domain using Ansible. So for that, we will have to write a playbook in which we are going to install the required Windows features first and then promote the system to the domain controller. So let's get started. Here we are going to write our playbook. So we will start with the name, and name is only a descriptive value that is printed. So we are going to call it configure AD forest. Now hosts. So we want this playbook to get executed on the system named domain controller in our YAML file. So the system with IP address of 192.168.10.31 is uh, is going to be targeted by this playbook. Now gather facts, no, because we do not want Ansible to collect 100 plus facts which we are not going to use. So facts like the IP address, CPU, RAM, disk, etc. We don't need any of that. So with that, let's get started with our tasks. And the first task we are going to do is to install Active Directory. Active Directory feature. Windows Server Active Directory feature. Now we need to put a space after dash. So the feature name, it is a good practice to use the fully qualified names, and the name is ansible.builtin.win feature. And here, what do we want to do is we want it to install the Windows feature called AD domain services. We also want to include management tools. So the tools like Active Directory users and computers and other Active Directory management tools will be included in the install. And finally, we need to set the state to present, which will force Ansible to install the AD domain services if it is not installed. But suppose if it is installed, Ansible won't do anything. Let's also check that we have our Ansible admin account available to manage this node. Yes, we have Ansible admin, and Ansible admin is a member of administrators group. So as you can see, AD domain services feature is available but not installed. Another feature we are going to need is DNS. So let's check that as well. DNS is also not installed. So now we are going to go back to our playbook and execute it and see what happens. So the playbook configure AD forest have started, and it is going to execute the only task, which is install Windows Server Active Directory feature here. So let's check again. Of course, it is going to take some time, so we need to be patient. In the meanwhile, let's write another task. And this task is going to install DNS. As you can see, this task is still getting executed on this node. So for now, let's shut down the PowerShell and wait for the command to complete. So as you can see, our task is now executed and status is changed, which means Active Directory feature was not installed and Ansible has installed it. So if I run the playbook again, it is going to say OK, which means the task we wanted to execute is already complete, so nothing needs to be done. But now it is going to install the DNS feature. So now we are going to see one more changed is equal to 1. And OK is going to be 2 because we are executing 2 tasks. One of those tasks is actually doing some activity on the node. Other task just checked that Active Directory feature is installed and returned back. So while this is happening, let's go ahead and write the third and most important task, which is promote the server to domain controller, or let's call it create the active directory forest. So here, as we discussed, 2 tasks got executed with OK status. One of them actually did something, which was install the DNS feature. Now if I run this playbook again, okay, so we cannot because we have a repetition of this task. So let's remove it for now and run the playbook again. So as you can see, this time playbook returned with no change tasks because we already have Active Directory and DNS installed. So let's go back and write our Active Directory forest creation tasks. For this, we are going to need a different module, and that module is Microsoft.ad dot domain. And here we have to specify different parameters, and those parameters are going to be none of these, so let's delete them. Parameters we need to create a domain is the DNS domain name. And this name is going to be, let's say, sklab.local. Another parameter we need is safe mode password. And here let's put a password, my safe mode 123 exclamation at the rate hash. Of course, this is not a secure practice to put passwords like this, but we will make Ansible secure in the coming lessons. Then another feature that is needed is domain. Another parameter that is needed is domain net BIOS name, which we are going to set to sklab local. Of course, NetBIOS is a flat naming convention protocol, so we cannot have a dot. And then we also want to ensure that DNS is installed, although this is not going to do anything because we have already installed DNS here. And last but not the least, we will set reboot to true. If there is a reboot required, system will reboot itself and come back automatically. And when the reboot will complete, it will be a Windows Active Directory forest. So let's go and execute our playbook again. Now this time you will see first two tasks are going to be fast, but the third task is going to take time. Okay, so we made a mistake despite discussing that we don't need a dot here. Somehow a dot remained, so let's save and execute our command line. Sorry, execute the playbook again. And here you can see because our task failed, it status shows that one of the tasks did fail. But hopefully this time it is going to be perfect. So now, as you can see, domain controller node is configured with Active Directory forest and system has rebooted and logged on. Let's check, do we really have the AD forest we wanted to create? Yes. We have sklab.local and we have a pretty much functioning domain. So let's now do a concept recap. So in this first lesson, we introduced the course, then we learned about Ansible architecture. Then we did the installation of Ansible control node. After this, we configured our Linux and Windows managed nodes with WinRM and SSH. Then we created inventory files in INI as well as YAML format. After this, we simplified the command line with ansible.cfg by moving the common parameters into the ansible.cfg file. Then we created our first playbook, and in this playbook we explored tasks and some of the Ansible concepts like collecting the system information, and displaying the messages. So we explored two modules to be with two built-in modules, which are Ansible built-in setup and Ansible built-in debug. After this, we installed the Windows Active Directory components and created a forest. And here we learned about two more modules, which are Win feature. Using this, we installed Windows Server feature for Active Directory and DNS. And then the last module we used is Microsoft ad.domain to create the Active Directory domain. I hope this was useful to you. So in the next part, we are going to refine our knowledge of Ansible and learn about more concepts such as security, variables, group variables, etc. So subscribe and stay tuned for the next part. So please subscribe and stay tuned for the next part. If you like the course so far, if you like this content, please subscribe for the next part.